All right. Our good friend Dr. Morten Bay is back with more silliness. So this was an article I came across all this morning. I think it actually was published yesterday, or a couple days ago. So Star Wars, The Last Jedi reactions show how right-wing Twitter agitators adopted Russian tactics. And okay, now are we changing our tune? Because before it was Russian bots and haters. So now it's Russian tactics, okay? My study suggests that some conservative activists have found Russian trolling tactics useful to spread their own messages. This is just ridiculous. So let's see what he's got to say, or pretend. We know that, again, studies, you can use the words, whenever time you see the word study, be mindful what's going on, because it's very easy to manipulate any data to say anything you want. You can exclude data, or not look at in depth, or pile stuff together that's really not related to get your numbers up, which is what he did in his in that paper with the 50.1% bots and people with political agenda. So which version of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, did you see? Did you watch the complex philosophical film that reinvigorated the saga? That was not on. There were moments that had hints of complexity, philosophical complexity. I will say that. Now, I watched the movie quite off my rocker, but I did see some moments there, especially when Luke was talking about the past and how the Jedi felt. Anyway, are we exposed to the radical leftist hyper-feminist propaganda film? Well, in some ways you had that, but that was more TFA, because Mary Sue wasn't quite as Mary Sue-ish, although, she did shoot, first shot from the Millennium Falcon's guns. One shot goes through 3 TIE fighters, something that's never happened before. But, she probably 360 no-scoped it like any other gamer girl would, and, she's not a Mary Sue, so that's being sexist. Or did you see the one where director Rian Johnson killed Luke Skywalker, broke the hearts of all fans, and caused a boycott of the saga? In Star Wars fandom on social media, all 3 exist at once. Here's what I saw, Dr. Bay. I saw a poorly constructed movie that felt like a first draft script that a film student would do. It felt fanboyish. It also felt like it was giving the middle finger to all of the various fans and all of their theories. It was very poorly constructed, very poorly paced. Was not even consistent with its own narrative, let alone the rest of the universe. So in your own paragraph there, you've neglected what most of the disdain for the movie is about. We know our heroes are going to die, but we had, we wanted them all together one last time. And we didn't want them cucked. We didn't want all their hard work from 30 years ago completely undone because narrative. As a social media researcher and Star Wars devotee of 4 decades, I have followed the The Last Jedi debate intensely since it began in 2017. It fascinated me to see how the first Star Wars film of the post-truth Trump era. Say, okay, we already know his political leanings. This whole narrative that Trump just lies all the time, it's the same thing that, well, I don't know, it's the same thing. It's very similar to a lot of conservatives were about, Barry Soros, not Barry Soros, but what was his last name? His real last name, Barack Obama. But that he was constantly like. Now, Barack, I don't think he didn't believe he was lying. That's the difference. He's just a puppet. So he's been told to do things, but he also believes in a social construct that has been proven through history, decades of history, to be incorrect. So anyway, it fascinated me to see, because there are people, they're going to take our guns. Anyway, it's fascinating to see how the post-truth Trump era that had some fans clinging to dubious sources and unverifiable misinformation to assert the film that they saw was The Last Jedi, and that what? People went and saw the movie and were here. A lot of people were already kind of kicked in the teeth because of The Force Awakens. Now, some accepted it and were like, okay, but that's just part 1 of a 3-part saga. We're going to get more stuff in 2, and then it's going to wrap up in the 3. And so, 7, 8, 9. And that didn't happen. And Rian Johnson took almost every single thread. Now, granted, they weren't many, that Jar Jar gave him, and he crapped on it. And so even people who were apologists for the TFA didn't like the second one because of what it did. And it was not it was one of those pseudo-intellectual movies that wants to be deep, but really isn't. So let me read that again, because that doesn't make any sense to me. It fascinated me to see how the first Star Wars film of the post-truth Trump era had some fans clinging to dubious sources and unverifiable misinformation to assert that the film they saw was the true Last Jedi, and that the others were definitely not. I still don't get that. In other words, so Rey's not a Jedi, and that Rey being a gray Jedi or a gray or a non-Jedi Force user or something has been around since the first film, the TFA, since Episode 7, the first film of the Disney era. It really feels like this guy just kind of fell into the controversy and is trying to spin it to his own narrative. So I did what social scientists do and began collecting data for a potential study. By the summer 2017, several spikes of unrest had occurred in the Star Wars fandom. So this is before the movie's out, right? Particularly involving director Rian Johnson's Twitter account, observing these spikes. I don't remember a lot of hatred toward Rian Johnson, other than, he did have things like he did troll the fans. He had the picture of him saying, your Snoke theories suck. That kind of became a meme. So really, in many ways, Johnson started some of this stuff, okay? Or at least encouraged it. I had first encountered what we call Russian trolls in 2015, decided to study Russian trolls, right? That again, if he gets back to the election, this was really going to irritate me, because it's been shown time and time again that the Russians didn't influence, and the influence they were trying to have was on the Democrat side. And even when Obama was running for re-election, he even told Putin, hey, I have this election thing, but afterwards I'm going to have more freedom to do things, because he didn't have to worry about being re-elected. So the influence has always been on the other side of the fence. This is just ridiculous. By the time I finished my dissertation in spring, how in the world this guy get a dissertation? I began quite adept at spotting Twitter trolls, not just Russian ones. There are a lot of people that troll. In short, there are certain characteristics that are unique to Russian trolls, like their accounts being created years prior, then laying dormant for years, only to be suddenly activated. Why? Okay. All right. I have several Twitter accounts that I used to do stuff, marketing and things years ago. A couple of them I did resurrect, and one of them I actually completely branded. And so that's not necessarily, and I'm not a troll, and I'm not Russian. And do not Russian, do not drink the vodka. Other telltale signs include sudden shifts from one language to another, the timing of the post during the Russian workday instead of the work. Okay, now that might be. Analyze trollish behavior. Okay, so I will give you, Dr. Bay, I will say, okay, it sounds like you were at least attempting to do some real research here. So that's a little bit logical. Find fake so-called sock puppet accounts that were spreading negative discriminately in short bursts. Those few accounts. Okay. Found 16 accounts I have been tentatively identified as Russian trolls out of 967 accounts. Okay. So we're dealing with not quite 20%. Okay. Without access to internal data, I wasn't able to confirm their Russian origins with certainty, but Russian trolls, okay. So why would Russian trolls give a crap about Star Wars movies? Why in the world would they even care? Other than maybe to fan some flames and have some fun, maybe. However, there was another more prevalent finding in the data that concerned me much more than the prevalence of potential political operatives, mostly right wing. No, they're not right wing. They're just conservative. Conservatives are not right wingers. Okay. This whole right wing left thing, I did a whole video on it years ago, and it's basically it's the two tips of the spear of tyranny, because conservatives really aren't right wing. They're pseudo libertarians with with a little bit of a religious bent usually, or a philosophical bent, as opposed to free love and free will. Basically, those are more liberal libertarians, if you will. Posted by some people who only rarely engage with Star Wars fandom. Otherwise, yeah. See, here's what this is so far missing. There were many people who didn't. I've encountered several of these people that until these new movies, maybe they were on Twitter, maybe they shared a few things here and there, maybe they shared a pro-gun thing or pro-Republican thing or something like that, and then the Star Wars movies came out, and they really got irritated, and they were irritated by The Force Awakens and Rogue One. Kind of, it's like, hey, maybe it isn't so bad. And then before the movie came out, the trolling that Rian Johnson did and different things, and you started having this in Hollywood. Well, right, we had Ghostbusters 2016, we had this other, all men are stupid, and the whole era in Hollywood was it was about that, and people started to get more and more annoyed, and it started to activate people who normally wouldn't give a crap, but were tired of being skewered, and it continues on even now. I've never seen such deliberate attempts to try to connect an already contentious fan debate with bigger, completely unrelated political issues. For those who haven't seen them, Star Wars movies skew center-left, Hollywood style, but avoid addressing. They don't really skew center-left. Now they kind of do now, but not the previous ones. The previous ones were about the defeat of tyranny, and tyranny is its own arrow. Typically statist. And if you're going to put, this is why I hate the right left thing. Politics is really more 3 or 4 dimensional. It's not just 2 dimensional. And the difference between, say, fascism and socialism and communism is semantics. It's still just tyranny. You don't really care what kind of boot is on your throat. You just care that there's a boot on your throat. In my mind, they push to polarize the community. No, see, in your mind, but people were already polarized. This is why they were reacting. Okay, so this guy's got the causality backwards. Social media platforms are now integral to business, to news distribution, communication, information dissemination in our society. I would say that's true. The current regular debates aside, it's time to have a serious political conversation about social media cultures. But even with the response to my small academic paper shows that some people aren't ready for that. No, what we did is we tore apart your paper. That should never have been approved. If that was a real study and a real dissertation, I mean, anyway, but that's right. That wasn't his dissertation. The other thing was his dissertation. But that paper he came out with, people who would, normally agree with a leftist, even will say, or a so-called modern day liberal, tore it apart because you skewed the data in your favor to make a point. You already had your political point and you ignored actual data and actual events. Doesn't matter if it's peer reviewed. That's really just a filtration system to make sure that non-biased or unbiased opinions don't get out. We don't want, crazy ideas getting out. So that's the downside of peer review. So that doesn't really give it credence at all, except for publication on top. Again, doesn't matter and is in common. And as is common among, because you want to make sure that the right message gets out. Now, if you had looked at the data and said, there's a small little, we're talking that you were able to verify. So first of all, you pared down your sample so that to less than 1,000, so that those that were bot, in your mind, verified bot accounts, 16 of them, it feels like a larger number. But when you start looking at the total sample of people complaining on Twitter, okay, that 16 probably is out of 10,000 or even more. I mean, I don't know how many people have Twitter accounts, but you already skewed the sample so that your number looks bigger. So now we're starting to talk about 2% or maybe even less than 1%. So that's part of the problem. I shared a draft of paper so that fellow academics could take a look. Then Ryan Johnson retweeted the study, followed by several fans. All of a sudden, news Twitter started posting some very ill-informed protest videos, and my Twitter account was blown up. See, and I did a couple of videos on it, and I didn't really. I'm not confrontational, so I'm not gonna, I put it on Twitter, but I didn't tag him. And study social media among, I do not to care about that, but there hasn't been. What my study reveals is that some old news about Russian isn't some old. Yeah, it is old news. It reveals that users must now wrap themselves in the same paranoia and hypervigilance they employed when walking around in a foreign major city if they want to avoid political manipulation. Well, that is true. And I don't know if he's being sarcastic here or not, but yes, you have to be vigilant because you've already admitted that you started from a social construct and you were going to prove that social construct. So you've already taken the bite out of your entire argument, and we're about 2/3 way through the article. And now, if you complain that people are, I guess because you say paranoia. Hypervigilance and paranoia are not necessarily synonyms, and they're not necessarily related, because paranoia is you think someone's after you and there isn't, where if you're hypervigilant, you have evidence that things aren't necessarily directed at you, but there are things out there to be careful of. This is why the so-called, the lamestream media, several have called them for years, has been losing audience for a long time. How do you think Fox News grew so much? Back, I don't know, was that 20 years ago, 15? I don't even know. I don't watch the channel, so I don't know. But people were sick and tired of being lied to. And what was really neat is back, 20, 25 years ago, we even had the medias going after each other, showing how 60 Minutes did something, and then there was 2020 did something, and they had, I remember there was a video about showing a collision with a truck. This was I think it was a Ford, but I don't remember, but it had extra tanks and how they could blow up. Well, they discovered an explosive device. Somebody did freeze frame of the video, and you can see smoke. And so it was, that can happen, but it's, it's not, the likelihood is not zero, but it's very small. And so to make sure it happened, they use an explosive device to cause the fire to happen. They used to expose each other, and now they're in cahoots. And this is why, good grief, back when Clinton was president, the likes of Rush Limbaugh and others were calling CNN the Clinton News Network. And it's also why the talking points go out, and every single, even the local news outlets now, people have done videos showing the national news, scores of local news all over the country, verbatim, and even the cadence of what they say is the same, and they put it all together and it all fits, and you know that these are just robots repeating. That's why people are vigilant, because they're tired of being manipulated and lied to. So to claim this is because of Russian bots in Star Wars is ludicrous. So and I've been skipping most of it, they did not. Kelly Tran said what was racist in Hollywood, not racist Star Wars fans. So this is even wrong. Kelly Tran never said it was the fans. She said she was tired of the typecasting and other BS she had to deal with Hollywood, and that's why she left. And really, she also probably had a non-disclosure. And Daisy Ridley left for similar reasons. They're just making it up, hoping people. And the thing is people will read this and they'll believe it. This is NBCnews.com. Okay, this isn't like, The Onion or Mother Jones or the Mary Sue. We all deserve better. Leaders of social media companies have to acknowledge that their platforms will never be neutral and stop pretending that they are. Well, that I agree with. Twitter can ban sock puppet accounts, trolls, if they want. Well, but they're only shadow banning conservative ideas. We'll say small government ideas, maybe even libertarian ideas in some regard. Okay. Of course, this won't stop many people I spotted in my study who just want to spread. Yeah, and that's spread on both sides. Look at who we see videos of, these absolutely insane individuals. They're all so-called leftists. They're been programmed to speak this way. Only users can change that by demanding transparency from those who express themselves on social media like they probably never would in public. Again, I try to be consistent as I can, and I do videos. I can't publicly speak, and a lot of people I know, part of the reason why people that some of I follow on Twitter and on YouTube these days, they weren't even into this until they saw The Last Jedi. I really ought to be doing this in video, because I am just waving my hands everywhere. I'm trying not to hit my mic. I'm trying to hurry up because my neighbor keeps mowing his lawn and doing stuff. He's doing yard work this morning and goes right by my window. Anonymity must always be an option with whistleblowing or privately associating with like-minded people being just two good reasons. But it's also okay for users to demand that an online adversary put a real name and face to that. Why? How many of these leftist bots are out there that are fake accounts? Okay, this is only what's this when it with people with whom he disagrees. That's the problem. It's okay to ignore, be dismissive, or even block someone on social media who is bold enough to be vitriolic. This is why I try not to get vitriolic. I may on my video, or I may just in public, or go out in the backyard and scream and holler at the sky, just to get out of my system. But you won't. And I know people, and I've known some. I'm like, you can't. You keep. This is, I think, why in some ways, Alex Jones. This is one of the things that with Alex Jones that drives me crazy is he has he'll expose things, and sometimes it takes years for some of his stuff to actually be shown to be correct. And then he gets in someone's face and at Capitol Hill. It's like, you had a chance to be the bigger person, and it's like he sabotages. I don't know, but I'm not an Alex Jones fan. I just occasionally watch his videos, but I try to get information from all over. And the thing is, with the status, I only have to get from one source, and they all parrot exactly the same thing. So, but to get other ideas, to get a little more libertarian approach, I got to go one place. To get a more conservative approach, I got to go another place. To get a more, we'll say, classic liberal, Sargon of Akkad or something like that. I like listening to them. I like it when they disagree. and they discuss the ideas and they go back and forth and they don't belittle each other. And it's really interesting to see that it change during the conversation and the idea starts to change that, hey, maybe we've got some things wrong here. Let's drop the wrong parts and pick up the parts that are right. And the media shouldn't trust someone going by feminazi sucks, suck 88 as why not? Why is a title? We've been told gender is fluid. And if I want to be in an attack helicopter today and a man tomorrow and a woman the day after that, that titles are meaningless. And yet this person wants to say titles have importance. Make up your mind. If we can build that culture, accountability as users, maybe we have already built it. Here's the thing is you don't want to hear something you disagree with. And that's the problem. And so that's when you're starting to ban people. Now I will agree. Some people, this is okay. So this is other stuff. Dr. Bay, Mr. Morton here, maybe you should quit while you're ahead. Because this just shows that your entire thesis starts with a political bent. You ignore all data, which is actually in the academic world. This is why a lot of people who are critical of it will call it the quackademics, because they ignore everything that goes against their narrative. And with peer-reviewed research, what that really does, unfortunately, is it filters out ideas. There are academics, I wish I could remember this lady's name, but it was back in the 70s. She was basically tossed out when she found evidence in Central America of human habitation 150,000 years ago and some older. It has been buried, but because it went against the already developed political narrative that the Native Americans were here first. Well, we've already found evidence that there were people of European ancestry here long before them. Some other people possibly, especially in Central America and in South America, possibly from Africa. We're talking, and this idea that 10,000 years ago now, that when the ice sheets melted very, very rapidly and sea levels rose. I mean, even geologists like Dr. Schock are starting to see this information in ice cores where they're starting to get down to days, which, something that takes 1,000 years in geological time is fast, and it's blowing his mind. But at least he's open. And does he agree with everything? No, but he's open to the discussion, even with Graham Hancock about, was it solar flares? Was it something striking the ice sheets? But it's that is an academic discussion where those various ideas can be debated openly and fairly, and new evidence come to light and not be dismissed. So already here, he's got his filter going, that he gets things down. Where was that? Right there. 967 accounts out of how many thousands of people that were tweeting about The Last Jedi, is in particular after they saw the movie and were beyond disappointed. What they don't like is we're on to their social construct and their social narrative. We know what they're doing, and it's from multiple sources, like the David Icke, Limbaugh, Hannity, Alex Jones, Sargon, all these and they all have different ideas, and they all believe certain things similarly, and then on the fringes they disagree on a lot of stuff. But they all are, and you have, what's his name in Canada? His name is, but anyway, but they all are willing to have the debate, even if the result is they agree to disagree. They still have the civil debate, whereas people like you, Doctor, don't want to have the debate. You just want to shut down and claim that it's Russian bots, or it's just trolls, or it's just haters, and it's nothing else. It's just fringe. It's just a handful of people, which may be a handful of people, blah, 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 But, you're alt-right, your right wingers, there's like 20 of them in the entire country. And they're not on social media, Doctor. They're not for this. But anyway, I think Dr. Morten Bay needs to stop while he's ahead, but of course he won't, because he can't stand it that people disagree with him and have disproved his entire dissertation with his own data. That's what's more amazing than anything. Is people have broken down his own paper and disproved or shown his extreme bias, which discounts his argument because of the data that was ignored. All right. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you. Thanks for clicking like, and see you next time. This has been Brain Muffin ranting about Star Wars news. Woohoo! Bye.